Welcome everyone. In this video, we're going to talk and break down Ernest Holmes' book, Creative Mind. I'm going to play a segment and provide commentary on what I think is perhaps the greatest segment from his book. Ernest Holmes is a teacher, spiritual writer, philosopher who really talks about this idea of law of attraction. But what I like about this particular segment, as we're going to hear together, is that it really talks about the essence of law of attraction at its deepest level. And what I'm going to try to do, as it is one of my greatest passions, is to see if we can synthesize how the law of attraction makes sense within the context of spirituality, spiritual awakening, spiritual enlightenment, and non-duality. And in doing so, my ultimate aim is to show you that the spiritual awakening process, as well as the process of mastering the law of attraction, is ultimately and most fundamentally the same process. The process of answering the most important question that one can ask. Who am I? And what is the nature of reality? So, with that being said, let's jump into the video and let's see if we can unravel the answer to that question and provide clarity on how we can create a life that will ultimately lead to our deepest peace, our greatest happiness, and our most supreme success.
The law of our lives. Spirit creates through law. The law is always mind in action. Mind cannot act unless intelligence sets it in motion. In the great universal mind, man is a center of intelligence, and every time he thinks, he sets mind into action. What is the activity of this mind in relation to man's thought? It has to be one of mental correspondence. That is, mind has to reflect whatever thought it cast into it. Wonderful as universal mind is, it has no choice but to create whatever thought is given it. If it could contradict that thought, it would not be a unit, since this would be recognizing something outside of itself. This is a point in truth which should not be overlooked. The one mind knows only its own ability to make whatever is given it. It sees no other power and never analyzes or dissects. It simply knows. And the reason why people do not understand this is that they have not realized what mind is. The ordinary individual thinks of mind only from the limitation of his own environment. The concept he has of mind is the concept of his own thinking, which is very limited. We are surrounded by an all-seeing, all-knowing mind, which is one and runs through all. The belief in the dual mind has destroyed practically all philosophies and religions of the ages, and will continue to do so until the world comes to see that there is but one. Whatever name is given it, there is but one. It is this one that creates for us whatever we believe. Our thought operative through this one produces all our affairs. We are all centers in this mind, centers of creative thought activity. There is nothing which appears in the manifest universe other than an objectified thought, whether it be a bump on your head, a growth on your foot, or a planet. It could...
Okay, so already Ernest Holmes has made this point of distinction between the universal mind or the one mind and mental activity. So what is he actually talking about? And how does this relate to the true nature of reality, who we are, and the law of attraction? How do we synthesize this so that it makes crystal clear sense? When he says there is one mind, what he is ultimately talking about is our higher consciousness as pure universal mind. We could call it the mind of God. We could call it universal mind, We could call it unity consciousness. We could call it transcendence. But most importantly and fundamentally is to recognize that the true nature of what you really are is pure consciousness. And this is important because he says that very few understand the nature of their own mind. So many of us, and I would say the vast majority of us, are identified with our thinking. We think, therefore we are. This is the common notion of identity, is it not? We wake up and we say, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need to go to work, right? These are all identifiers that are based on mental activity. And so we believe that we are this mental activity, not recognizing that we're the consciousness behind the mental activity. And in the recognition or in the awareness that what you really are is the consciousness or the universal mind behind the mental activity, then we also awaken to the true nature of thought. And so when you hear very often this notion that thought creates reality, it's actually slightly imprecise. Because it's not so much that thoughts create your reality, it's the consciousness behind the thoughts that creates reality. Your consciousness is what creates reality. And because everything is consciousness, because consciousness is the first principle of all of reality, it is the fundamental essence from which all of life emerges and to which all of life returns to. It is the primordial first principle behind the creation of all that we see in the world. And as a result, when we recognize that we are pure consciousness, then we come, or what we could say is we evolve into the understanding that thoughts is the creative medium by which we are given sovereignty in existence to create reality in alignment with whatever the contours of our thoughts and our emotions give rise to. And this is an important distinction, because if we believe that only our thoughts create reality, which is imprecise in terms of a complete understanding, then we forget that it's not just our thoughts that create our reality. It is our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, our perceptions, our beliefs, our actions, and our habits. It is the totality of what we are in every present moment that ultimately creates our reality. And this is why the law of attraction has been deeply misunderstood. It is not that the law of attraction doesn't exist or that it isn't possible to create your reality. It's simply that our thoughts are not the only force which breathes life as a creative principle. It is the totality of our thoughts, emotions, sensations, perceptions, actions, and habits, and their totality that give rise to existence. But it is first and foremost thought. Like a seed that grows over time as you control your thoughts, consciously choosing the thoughts that you would like to see manifest in the world. Those thoughts give birth to new emotions. Those new emotions give birth to new thoughts that are likened to itself. And as these thoughts and as these emotions grow in the soil of your conscious, deliberate focus, they rise like a tree and give rise to ideas. And those ideas give rise to action. And those inspired actions give rise to new habits. And those new habits, if you sustain in the cultivation of those thoughts and emotions and actions and new habits, give rise to new reality. And this is the first principle and a more clear understanding of the true nature of how law of attraction actually operates. But when we are identified with our thinking mind, and we are not grounded in the pure awareness of what we really are as consciousness, then instead of using mind as a creative tool, an evolutionary marvel forged over hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary growth, we instead surrender to the belief that life is chaos and that we are separated from everything and everyone around us. And in that separation, we give birth to what Buddha talked about when he said suffering. And the answer to suffering is the answer to the question of who am I? And as we awaken into pure consciousness, we awaken into the true nature of not only of what we are, but the true nature of what is mind, a creative tool that is subject to the laws of the universe like gravity. That what we think, what we feel, and what we do is the first cause of the reality and the circumstances which shape our life. Okay.
Not be there were it not made out of mind. For mind is all there is to make anything out of it. Whatever is made out of it. Nothing exists or can exist without a source from which it springs. We are not dealing with a negative as well as a positive power, not two powers, but one. A power that sees neither good nor evil as we see it. It knows only that it is all, and since it is all, it creates whatever is given it. From our limited standpoint, we often think of good and evil, not realizing that, as yet, we do not know the one from the other. What we call good today, we may call evil tomorrow. And what we think to be evil today, we may tomorrow proclaim as the greatest good we have known. Not so with the great universal power of mind. It sees only itself and its infinite ability to create. To the thinking person, this will mean much. He will see that he is no longer living in a limited universe, a world of powers, but that he is immersed in an infinite creative medium which, because of its nature, has to create for him whatever he believes.
So what's really important here is I'm going to make a couple tweaks to his use of language because I think it invites confusion. So when he says, for example, that mind is what gives life to the universe, it's the totality of what we are. The more precise word is pure consciousness. It's consciousness that is universal mind. But in the way he uses language, when he says mind, he's referring to pure consciousness. But if we're not careful, we might be listening to this and thinking, well, so my thinking mind, my egoic mind, my thoughts, my identification with suffering, my thoughts, my limited self, my finite mind is the universal mind. And when in reality, it's the higher dimensional universal mind of pure consciousness. That's your infinite mind. And that's really what we're talking about here. And so when he says to the thinking person, this will mean much, right? As you introspect on this topic and as you think about it, it awakens in you this understanding that there is no such thing as powers. In other words, good and evil. And so when he talks about good and evil, what he's fundamentally talking about here is the notion of duality, good and bad, up and down, left and right, notions that are interdependent, right? Up cannot exist without down. Good cannot be understood as a concept without evil. But he says there is no such thing as powers. There is only a power. In many religious traditions, this could be understood as the notion of a God. In spiritual traditions, this could be understood as universal consciousness. But most fundamentally, we can understand it as the very essence of what we are as higher dimensional consciousness. as the pure silence of awareness, as we awaken into our higher consciousness, transcending the finite mind of ego and awakening into the infinite mind of consciousness, we awaken into our infinite mind as God. And as we awaken into our higher identity as God, we awaken to the realization that there is no such thing as good or evil. What was good, what is good, and what is evil is relative to one's culture, to one's time on earth. There is only one power, and that is your power to architect reality itself, independent of all notions of good and evil. There's just universal mind, pure consciousness. You are the first power, the first cause, and the only cause of all that takes place in your reality.
Jesus understood this, and in a few simple words laid down the law of life. It is done unto all people as they believe. This is a great thing to keep in mind. It is done unto us. We do not have to do it, for it is done unto us of a power that knows itself to be all there is. Could we even believe that some material mountain would be moved? The power is there to do it. Without this belief, there is no real impulse for the creative mind, and we do not get an affirmative answer. We must realize more clearly that this great power has to.
And it's very important to also recognize that this notion of it's done onto you as you believe is both true. However, the language, again, is a little imprecise. Because, for example, I could believe that I can move a mountain, right? I believe I can move a mountain. But then if I get up out of this video and then I go about my day, and then I return back to the consciousness of someone who cannot move a mountain, then I'm not in a state of belief. So belief isn't what you as an egoic mind want to hold as being true. Belief is what you are in every single present moment. You have to embody your belief. You don't manifest or attract the things that you want or the things that you believe. You manifest the things that you are. Perfect example is I don't believe the sky is blue. I know the sky is blue, right? The difference between believing the sky is blue and just simply knowing the sky is blue is the difference between one's ability to attract and one's circumstances where they're caught with confusion and misunderstanding as to the true nature and laws of consciousness and how the universe actually operates.
Operate through us. Man's part. Creative mind cannot force itself upon us because we have the power of self-choice. It recognizes us when we recognize it. When we think that we are limited or have not been heard, it must take that thought and bring it into manifestation for us. When we look about us and see nature so beautiful, lavish, and so limitless, when we realize that something, some power, is behind all, and sees to it that plenty obtains everywhere, so that in all things manifest there is more than could be used. And when on the other hand we see man so limited, sick, sad, and needy, we are disposed to ask this question: is God good after all? Does He really care for the people of His creation? Why am I sick? Why am I poor? Little do we realize that the answer is in our own mouths, in the creative power of our own thought. The average person, when told the truth, will still seek some other way. God has already done for us in a mechanical way all that He can do, and having been given the ability, we will have to do for ourselves the rest. Yet the great power is always near, ready at any time to help. But we must use it according to its own nature in harmony with its laws. Man should learn that he himself is the center of this divine activity. Realizing this, he must seek more and more to utilize his own divine nature, and by so doing he will come fully under the protection of the great laws that govern all life, manifest and unmanifest. Whatever man is, he must find that because he is made out of God, he must be of the same nature. This infinite one cannot know anything outside of itself, anything that would be a contradiction of its divine nature. Man's ignorance of his real nature binds him with his own freedom until he comes to see things as they really are and not as they appear to be. In the infinity of mind, which is the principle of all metaphysics and of all life, there is nothing but mind, and that which mind does. That is all there is in the universe. That is all there ever was or ever will be. This mind is acted upon by our thought, and so our thought becomes the law of our lives. It is just as much a law in our individual lives as God's thought is in the larger life of the universe. For the sake of clearness, think of yourself as in this mind. Think of yourself as a center in it. That is your principle. You think, and mind produces the thing. One of the big points to remember is that we do not have to create. All that we have to do is to think. Mind, the only mind that there is, creates. Few people seem to understand the nature of the law, and so think that they have got to do something, even if it is only holding a thought. Thinking or knowing is what does the thing. It will make it much easier for us when we realize that we do not have to make anything just to know that there is something back of the knowing which does the work for us. That person gets the best results who realizes that he can use this divine principle, he who can get the clearest concept of his idea, and who can rely on mind to do for him, keeping everything out of his thought that would contradict the supremacy of spirit or mind. By simply holding a thought, we could not make anything. But by knowing in mind, what cannot we do?
And so what's really fundamentally important, this is probably the most important part of all these sort of mind science and law of attraction teachings, is that it's not enough to simply say to yourself, my thoughts create my reality. So I'm going to think positive and I'm going to believe it's going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, we say, well, what did I do wrong? What did I get? What did I misunderstand? Is this all a bunch of bullshit? Or am I not understanding something? And the answer, as Ernest Holmes said, is in your own mouth. It's in your own belief. So when you believe without realizing it, we could call this an unconscious belief that this is not going to work, or I don't have the power to do it, or this, I'm not good enough, or there's too many challenges. Or when you think you're believing it and you're understanding it and you're doing everything that you know you're supposed to do, but then unconsciously you're going through your life in a state of being where you're contradicting your desires. In other words, you're wanting something, but then as you go through your daily life, you're actually exhibiting the opposite states of consciousness, where you're full of worry, doubt, and fear. Then through your own quote unquote mouth or state of consciousness, you're actually contradicting yourself. But the power in the law is always there. It's always you. You and only you are the master puppeteer behind your own circumstances. And so when he says that thinking a thought will do nothing, but knowing in mind is what does the work, is the understanding that it's not enough to just believe in law of attraction. You must know law of attraction. You must know the truth. And the only way to know the truth is to awaken into the enlightenment. It is to not identify with your thoughts, but to awaken as pure consciousness. And so as we talked about at the very beginning of this video, is that the journey to making law of attraction work for you is the same journey of spiritual enlightenment. And this is why it's so hard for so many people to make law of attraction work. For the same reason why for thousands of years, spiritual enlightenment has been so elusive, so confusing, so challenging, with so much misunderstanding. To know in mind, or to know in pure consciousness, means that you are pure consciousness. And when you are pure consciousness, then the law of attraction becomes becomes a force of power that you can direct, because you are embodying the truth of what you really are.
Bondage and freedom. Never get away from the fact that you are surrounded by such a power. It is the principle of demonstration. It knows every thought. As we send forth our thought into it, it does unto us. The person who is ignorant of this law must by that ignorance be bound by his thought, by his human beliefs. One who understands will begin to break these ties that bind him. One by one, he will destroy every negative thought until at last he is able to think what he wants to think. And so he frees himself by the use of the same power that at one time bound him. We must destroy all thought that we would not see manifest and hold to that which we would see until we receive the affirmative answer. Never struggle. Mind makes things out of itself. There is no effort made. Don't think that there is so much to be overcome. Have only a calm sense of perfect peace as you realize that God is all, and that you are using the perfect law, and that nothing can hinder it from working for you. Many people are learning to do this, and no one has yet failed to demonstrate who has been steadfast, using the law in a consistent and persistent trust. All that we have to do is to provide the right mental and spiritual attitude of mind, and then believe that we already have, and the reward will be with us. We shall see it. The time will come when we will not have to demonstrate at all, because we will be always living so near to the law that it will do all for us without.
So this is what I would call this, like the idea of the peace of God, or the peace of higher consciousness, the peace of your soul, right? Is when you are able to live your life in a certain way, to where, you could be in a situation where you have credit card debt, financial bills, your house is on fire, you have challenges in your marriage, in your relationships, challenges with your kids, right? The multiplicity of challenges that make up the universal human experience, right? You could be in the midst of all of those challenges right now, recognizing that all of those challenges, no matter how hard it is to accept, has something to do with your state of consciousness, with your state of being, with what you've been thinking and feeling and doing and acting, your behaviors, your habits in your past. And in this moment, you could surrender into the peace of God. And what that means in a non-religious context, when we talk about universal principles of the true nature of reality, is that you can surrender into your higher consciousness of pure silence, where you say to yourself, I am a center of creation. Every thought, every emotion, creates a electric magnetic field of energy that gets expressed out into the great void of pure consciousness, drawing back into my life things that are likened to those thoughts and those emotions. And so you say, I will never allow myself to feel the feeling of credit card debt. I will not allow myself to think the thoughts of someone who is suffering from these relationship challenges. And you cultivate entirely new states of being within yourself, being financially free, being happy in your relationships, being free from the challenges. And you're not repressing or suppressing the challenges of your current life. You acknowledge them. You say, what action steps do I have the power to take? And then you take them. But between the decision to act and then waiting for those outcomes from those actions to manifest, you make the conscious choice that between now and whenever these fruits of these labors will manifest, I am going to completely change my neurochemistry. I will alter my thoughts, emotions into a new state of being where externally I'm surrounded by these challenges, but internally I'm existing in a new world. And this is the peace of God, because the promised land is the understanding that if you persist in your fidelity to that new state of being where you are free inside your subjective world of those challenges, that then the means and methods to realize and bring into existence that same freedom that you have cultivated within into the external material world will come into existence. And so there's never struggle. You evolve into the realization that you need not worry, you need not fear, you need not doubt, because you are a center of power. And you free yourself using the same laws that before binded you. And this is what Ernest Holmes is talking about. We're going to listen to a little bit more, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Much conscious thought on our part. So when you say, I am poor, sick, or weak, I am not one with the creative mind. You are using that creative power to keep yourself away from the infinite. And just as soon as you declare that you are one with God, there is a rushing out to meet you, as the Father rushed out to meet the prodigal son. The Spirit seeketh. But as long as your mind thinks in the terms of conditions you cannot overcome, the difficulty comes from our inability to see our own divine nature and its relation to the universe. Until we awake to the fact that we are one in nature with God, we will not find the way of life. Until we realize that our own word has the power of life, we will not see the way of life. And this brings us to the consideration of the use of the Word in our lives. The Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word is nigh thee, even in thy own mouth, that thou shouldst know it and do it. What does this mean? It clearly states that whatever power there is in the Word, and it says that it is all power, is also in our own mouths. There is no avoiding the fact that the Bible claims for man the same power in his own life and his own world that it claims for God. In the lives of the majority, men do not realize that the Word is in their own mouths. What Word? Little do we realize that this Word which they are so earnestly seeking is every word they hear, think, or speak. Do we who are endeavoring to realize the greater truths of life always govern our words? If any word has power, it follows that all words have power. It is not in the few moments of spiritual meditation that we demonstrate, but we bring out the possibilities of the hidden word when we are allowing our thoughts to run in any direction. Not in the short time spent in silence, but in the long hours stretching themselves into days, months, and years, are we always using the Word. An hour a day spent in silent meditation will not save us from the confusion of life. The 51% of a man's thinking is what counts. It is easy when we are alone to brave the storms of life. Surrounded by our own exalted atmosphere, we feel the strength of the infinite. We rise in spirit. We think we are experiencing the ultimate of truth, that all things are ours. These moments in a busy life are well spent, but must unavoidably be brief. But what of the rest of the day? What of the busy street, of the marketplace, and of all the daily contact with life? Do we then obtain? Do we keep on in the same even way? Or do we fall before the outer confusion of our surroundings? We are still creating the Word and setting it afloat in the great ethers of life. Are these words creating for us? Yes. How necessary then to keep the independence of the solitude. How seldom we do this. Few people indeed in the day in which we live are well poised. Where do we find the man who can live above his surroundings, who in his own thought can dominate all conditions, and in the midst of the crowd keep his own even way and his own counsel? When we do meet with such a person, we will know him. For we shall find on his face the image of perfect peace. We shall detect in his bearing the ease and independence that comes only to the man who has found himself and who is centered not in the outer, but in the inner world. Such a character as this has the power to attract to himself all of the best in the world. He is a center toward which all else must gravitate. The atmosphere which he creates and with which he surrounds himself is one of absolute calm and peace. The world at once sees in this man a master and gladly sits at his feet. And yet this man who has risen above the thought of the world cares not that other people should sit at his feet. He knows that what he has done all may do. And he well knows that all the teaching in the world will not produce another such as he. He knows that it is not from the teaching, but from the being that true greatness springs. So this man does not go around teaching or preaching. He simply is.
So we're going to end this video with, I think, a good way that I want you to think about how to integrate everything that we've talked about so far in this video. As you live your life, as you go out and do your thing, always remember there are two worlds that are always existing simultaneously. There is the subjective world of thoughts, emotions, sensations, perceptions, actions, and beliefs. And then there's the objective world of matter, galaxy, stars, friends, relationships, careers. And we very often do not understand or clearly see the relationship behind how our subjective world is creating our objective world. And that this illusion of separation of the subjective and the objective is an illusion. It is. And that the very essence of enlightenment is your awakening into the understanding that the subjective and the objective is one and the same. But why, you might ask, is my objective world so different than what I want? And the answer is because your subjective world is so different than what you really want. If you let go of trying to control the objective world of space and time, trying to change your finances, trying to change your relationships, trying to change the things of the world, recognizing that they are but shadows, an echo of long expressed subjective phenomena, and you surrender and retreat into the subjective world and take control over its first principle, choosing the thoughts, choosing the emotions, choosing the states of consciousness. Not because you're trying to change the objective world, but because you understand that they're the same exact thing. That everything, as this video title so brilliantly states, everything is energy. Everything is subjectivity. Everything is consciousness. So when you express the state of consciousness of already having the things that you want, you already do. And if you persist in your fidelity, recognizing that that subjective expression of already having it will, over time, slowly come into physical existence. And then through practice, getting more and more and more examples that prove your hypothesis is indeed true. You see your relationships improving as your thoughts about them change. You see your finances improve as your emotions about money change. And in that process, in that evolution, then you become, as Ernest Holmes says, a master. And in that mastery, you will understand that there's nothing that you can say or do to teach other people what you have come to understand, because it's not from the teaching that you have achieved this mastery of your life. It's from your state of consciousness, from your transformation internally, that you have conquered the external. And perhaps this is the ultimate lesson of life, the purpose for human existence. For us to stop looking outside for our Savior and to awaken to the truth that we are that which we've been searching for. Thank you.